Hello and welcome back to music class. Last week we talked a lot about beat, which is the heartbeat of music. It's just that steady pulse that you feel in a song. And you did lots of activities with beat and you kept a steady beat and you did so good keeping your steady beats that it is time to move on. This week we are going to be talking about note values. What does that mean? That means that we are going to be looking at different kinds of notes, which I have a couple written out here for you. And we are going to be talking about the name of each note and how many beats each note gets, because each note has a specific name and a specific number of beats that it gets in music. And later on we'll talk about what that means, but for now we just need to know what the name of each note is and how many beats it gets before we can talk about what that means in music. The first note that we are going to be talking about is the quarter note. This is probably one of the most important notes that we can learn, which is why we're going to talk about it first. This is a quarter note. It's just a little filled-in hole with a stem, and it's called a quarter note. And take a minute to guess how many beats you think this gets. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. Go ahead and guess while I write it down. A quarter note gets one beat, okay? And last week we kept a beat together, which means that we just kept a beat like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. So since we were just clapping just like that, the notes that we were clapping were quarter notes, right? Because if a quarter note gets one beat and we clap 1, that's a quarter note. We clap again, that's another quarter note. Each note that we clap is one quarter note, okay? So I want to introduce you guys to something, okay? Because it can be kind of difficult to remember all of the notes sometimes, but I thought that maybe if I introduced you to someone, it might make it a little bit easier to remember the note names and how many beats each note gets. So this right here is a quarter note, right? I want to introduce you to Plum the quarter note, okay? So this is plum, because this is a plum, this is a fruit. If you don't know what a plum is, it's just a round purple fruit. And this is Plum the quarter note, okay? And we will be seeing Plum the quarter note a lot this year. But I just wanted to introduce you to Plum the quarter note because that might help you remember, okay? So again, Plum the quarter note gets how many beats? 1 beat. Very good. The next note that we have here is the half note, okay? The half note kind of looks like the quarter note, right? The only difference is it's not filled in. It's an open circle with the stem. So take a minute to guess how many beats you think a half note gets. I'll write it down. A half note gets 2 beats, okay? So what that means is that if a quarter note gets 1 beat, so if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, or we say quarter, 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 a half note would be held out for 2 beats. So we'd go half note, right? Because we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. A half note gets 2 beats. So I want to introduce you to our half note friend that will hopefully help us to remember a half note. We have Baby Donut, the half note, okay? Because he has that open circle that makes him a half note, and he gets 2 beats. The next note we have is a whole note, okay? And a whole note is just a big open circle, okay? Big open circle. So take a minute to guess how many beats you think a whole note gets. A whole note gets 4 beats, okay? Which means it gets a lot of beats. So again, if a quarter note gets 1 beat, we would just say quarter, 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 quarter. If a half note gets 2 beats, we would go half note, half note. And with a whole note, we would have 4 beats, which means it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? It would be a note that's held out for 4 whole beats. And our friend that I want to introduce you to for the whole note is Mama Donut, the whole note. So if you can see, Mama Donut and Baby Donut look very similar, except for what is the difference? The difference is that Baby Donut has a stem, and Mama Donut, the whole note, does not have a stem. She's just one big circle. There's one last note I want to introduce you guys to for the day. And this note is a little bit trickier to understand than the quarter note, the half note, and the whole note, but this note is the 8th note, okay? The 8th note can look like this, or it can look like this, okay? These are 2 8th notes put together, and this is 1 8th note on its own. And take a minute to guess how many beats you think a half note gets, okay? This is where it gets kind of tricky. So take a minute to guess how many beats you think an 8th note gets, okay? And this is where it gets kind of tricky. An 8th note gets half of a beat, okay? Which is kind of hard to understand. But let's think about it this way. If our quarter note is 1 beat and our 8th note is half of a beat, so I think the best way to think about 8th notes is to compare it to a quarter note, right? So if we have a quarter note, which is 1 beat, and 8th notes, which are half a beat, what does that mean? That means that 2 8th notes equal 1 quarter note, okay? So if we have, let's go back to our friends here. Oh, and let me introduce you to our 8th note friends. We have our 8th note cherries, okay? These are our 8th note friends that will help us to understand. And they're 8th notes because they're connected up here. So if we have plum the quarter note, which is 1 beat for plum the quarter note, and if we have 2 half beats that equal 1 beat, then 2 of our cherries will equal 1 plum, okay? So let's try and clap this out, okay? So if we have plum, 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 which remember, plum the quarter note, so we have plum, 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 and then we have cherry the 8th notes, that would sound like cherry, 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 because we have 2 8th notes for 1 quarter note. So again, let's do clap with me. Let's clap our plum quarter notes. Plum, 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 plum. And then let's clap our cherry 8th notes. Cherry, 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 cherry. So there's one last thing that I want to introduce you to, okay? And this isn't really necessarily a note, but it's very important, okay? This right here is our quarter rest, okay? And it doesn't get a name or a face because it's silent, okay? When you see this in music, it means it is silent. So I'm gonna have you take a guess. If plum the quarter note gets 1 beat, then how many beats of rest do you think a quarter rest gets? 1 beat, okay? So again, plum the quarter note gets 1 beat, and our quarter note rest also gets 1 beat, okay? Let's do one last review on the video, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to hold up one of our friends, and you are going to say out loud how many beats our friend gets, okay? So, Baby Donut, the half note, gets how many beats? 2. Very good. Mama Donut, the whole note, gets how many beats? 4. Good. Plum, the quarter note, gets how many beats? 1. Very good. Our quarter note rest gets how many beats? 1 beat of rest, good. And last but not least, our eighth note cherries. How many beats does one cherry get on its own? Half of a beat, good. And how many beats, if we put 2 cherry eighth notes together, how many beats does 2 cherry eighth notes equal? 1 beat. Very good. So again, we will be learning and talking all about these notes more in the future. So if you don't quite understand yet, or it's still a little bit confusing or difficult to grasp, that's okay. We'll be talking a lot about what this means in music, and we will be going over this a lot more. So I just wanted to introduce you to our special friends here because they will be with us a lot this year. So goodbye, and I will see you soon.